So we are back with a tier list, and this tier list will be a 2v2 tier list for Season 4 of Dragonflight. It is, again, PvP, logically, and we are going to talk about every spec. I'm going to try to put them at the right spot for this tier list. Obviously, everything can be discussed in the comment section below, and as you probably will see, the length of the video will be quite long, but it is because of me talking specifically with every spec and the arguments behind those placements. So you understand why I place those specs at the right spot, in my opinion. And obviously you can disagree on a few spots, or you can disagree on everything if you want to, but be sure to discuss with me in the comment section below if you do agree with me, and if you're not, try to back up with some of your arguments so we can have an active discussion. So let's talk with the 2v2 tier list. So we have also Drustfar open on the side, so we have also some backup, US and EU. Obviously the whole meta is quite the same, although there is a huge preference for MM in US, but I'm going to discuss about it as well. But let's talk about Affliction Warlock. So Affliction Warlock is the first spec I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to try to talk class per class so you can follow quite easily. So Affliction Warlock is interestingly a good spec in 2v2 because of the dampening aspect. I do feel like with the increased HPs that you have with Season 4, but also the healer meta, and obviously the whole meta around the melees and the range specs, I do feel like Affliction Warlock has a fair shot at actually climbing fairly easily. Obviously, the higher you go, the more difficult it becomes for you as an Affliction Warlock, because people know how to fight an Affliction Warlock. But I think in general, even if you know how to fight one, it's very difficult to deal with one, especially if he's playing with a resto druid that plays very aggressively as well, for example, with a cat form like feral affinity kind of feel, or he plays with a holy priest that does a lot of damage, or a disc priest that also does a lot of damage. It is very hard to out damage an Affliction Warlock in general. So with all that being said, I think being a range spec, which is not really the most favorable spec out there in 2v2, but also having no real mortal wound effect. You can have one in PvP talents, but it's very clunky. I don't really like that. But I feel like there is obviously some things that you don't have compared to the S tier spec. So I'm going to put them at A tier. It's a respectable tier. It's very good. I think in any other world where you have no S tiers, it would become an S tier. But I feel like if you compare with the S tiers that I'm going to put at S tier in my mind, I already have a few ones that I'm looking for. I feel like they do deserve an A tier spot. In comparison with a Destruction Warlock, where I do feel they are not that good, they lost the tier set, which is pretty big in twos, because twos is a very, very hard bracket to play in, because people are not going to stand in open for your eyes, right? They're going to try to play dirty with you, not let you cast off, and if they don't have a CC, they'll try to pillar, so you don't have a free cast like a chaos bolt or whatever, so you will have to work for those kills. And I do feel like, again, they don't have the benefits of an Affliction Warlock, and they don't have really a benefit from like the mortal wound effect that is also very difficult to place, because you have to chaos bolt, and people are not going to let you chaos bolt at all. So I feel like in general, I place them very low, but I think the overall meta doesn't suit Destruction Warlock at all, with DHs, windwalkers, rogues in general. Even Affliction Warlock is going to have a great time versus a Destruction Warlock, for example. I do feel like they're C tier. It's a very harsh placement, but I do feel like I'm kind of right with the tier set loss, and just overall the meta is not really suiting for a Destruction Warlock. Now in War Within, I do feel like there's a lot of things that are going to change in favor of Destruction Warlock, but right now in Season 4, Dragonflight, I don't think the meta is suiting Destruction Warlock at all, at least in twos. I think in threes they have a better chance, but in twos they do deserve a C tier spot. Demonology Warlock, on the other hand, they are actually a very, very good spec. It is unrepresented or lowly represented, but it is because they are not really a popular spec at all. they're like middle of the road kind of representation, and the higher you go, the more you will see, like compared to the overall demonology warlock that are available on the ladder. But I do feel like it gets a lot of help with the Felguard having a mess effect, having the CC that they can set up by themselves to land kills, having the damage profile of someone that is very, very zug, and you need to cast, but it is not as easy to stop a demonology warlock like let's say a destruction warlock, because a lot of those casts are not really doing a lot of damage, but they're preparing for the damage that is going to come. So I do rate them at the same level as an affliction warlock. I think those two are equal, so don't ask me who is ahead or not. I think they're equal, but they are like good versus different specs. I think demonology warlock really is suited for a lot of matchups where you do need the CC, and you do need the MS effect, and you do need the pets to actually deal constant damage. Where affliction warlock, they can do instantaneous damage and also just in general constant damage towards everyone, and through dampening he will win because of like attrition, while demonology warlock can win out of a good CC rotation, right? So for me, A tier, it's a good spot. And I want to talk about let's talk about druids really fast. I think druids are quite easy to rate. Now, balanced druid, for example, in twos are not fantastic. They are okay, but I think the issue with them is if you're playing double DPS, you have a MS effect loss. I'm going to drink a bit because I'm a bit thirsty. They do not have a MS effect. They also have great CC, but the CC is easily stopped in twos because of how pillars are working and how the environment works. I also feel like you need to take risks, or you have to play high dampening. And the higher dampening, the worse it becomes for the balanced druid to actually survive. And I think you have a few comps that you can play in that is suited for twos, like for example a Boomy with a sub rogue or Boomy with an assassination rogue. You can make it work. You can also play Boomy with a holy paladin, for example, or you can play a Boomy with a holy priest. I would not recommend a disc priest, but with a holy priest it's possible. I do feel like you can have good games, but I don't think it's easy to play. I also think it's a lot of snooze fest. I'm going to still put them at B tier because I'm not going to put a tier between B and C because it's going to be very redundant. But I do feel like they're like middle of the road. They can work, but it's not like fantastic. And it does feel like all games are going to go to dampening, and it's not like the same kind of dampening as affliction warlock because you're not really doing as much damage as an affliction warlock with just dots. You still need your goes, you still need your big eclipse with a lot of big star surges, or if you're playing Starfall, good luck to you. But I think Starfall is not really working in twos, but if you want to do that, you can do that. But I think it's with Star Surge and how you can build your balance route, you can play around your one shots. But again, one shots are like again cheesy, and most of the time they are easily stopped, especially in twos where you have full control of your own character, and often you are on voice with your second partner, like with your partner, so you have an easier time to stop those goes. You can cheese with Convoke and such, but I would not recommend. I think it's too easy to stop. I think Convoke has been seen and done already. I don't think it's like a good spell right now. But I think B tier I'm going to keep at that. So right now, Resto Druid, I think Resto Druid is a good healer. I think it lacks a few things to be the best healer right now, and I think it is purely the damage throughput. I think you still need to sacrifice a lot to be able to do damage, and you can pair yourself up with an affliction warlock or with a demonology warlock or whatever, and you can then do some okay damage. But you have to sacrifice either your mastery because you need some haste, or you're going to go crit and you're going to play full convoke, and again it's very cheesy. You're going to win some games because of that, but often it is easy to stop one. I think Resto Druids are fantastic at cycloning. They are fantastic at pairing yourself up with like a OP spec. I think Resto Druid with a DH is really strong. I think Resto Druid with a Survival Hunter or a BM Hunter is incredibly strong with the CC. But everything I'm going to say is that every pairing that you can give to a Resto Druid if you change the resto druid with a holy priest, it might just become a better comp. Especially right now with how CC is working and how the overall pressure of a holy priest can be and the overall playstyle. But again, the only thing that you can have as a resto druid that is superior to those specs is the regen of mana that is a bit less aggressive than a holy priest, but also you can take drinks again, so you can reset and drink, and then you can come back with a bit more HP, a bit more mana than the enemy, and you might win with dampening. But again, it's like a very, very passive spec that you can turn into an aggressive spec, but it doesn't really pay off all the time. I'm still going to put them at A tier because I'm very hesitant. I want to put them at S tier, but then in my head is I have like one spec that is also S tier, another one that could be S tier. Do I want to have potentially 3 S tiers like the healers? It could be, but I think right now the justification for a tier is that I want to have my top 3, but only 2 might be S tier, or 1 might be S tier, and the other 2 are going to be A tier. So I'm going to see at the end of the video if I can change something to that aspect, but I do believe it's a tier spec. Feral Druid, on the other hand, is a spec that is very hard to play. I think Feral Druid is very surprising at how it plays and the overall placement of, I would say, your arenas and how you have to win. I do feel like it's not easy for you to climb, but if you're looking at the ladder, above 2400 you have 6 Feral Druids, which is the top representation in 2400. In 2100 you have 37, but I think in general the whole popularity of Feral Druid is really low. So does it mean that it is a good spec, or does it mean that it is like not really a good spec? It just is mained by all the Feral mains that are still maining since till today, right? So for me it's a bit tough to decide where I'm going to put. I do feel like for me, in my head, it is top A tier. It might be even S tier, but again, like I said, I don't want to put everyone at S tier that I do believe that they're very strong. So I need to have some separation. But for me, it's a really high contender to the S tiers. I think Feral Druid with a Holy Priest, or Feral Druid with a Disc Priest, or Feral Druid with, I don't know, you could even pair up with a Fistweaver if you want to, although I'm not really like that fan of a Fistweaver right now in 2s. But I do feel like you have a lot of pairings that are working purely on the efficient side of things, where you can easily do a lot of damage. I think the only thing that I'm really concerned for Feral Druid is that all the top healers are DRs from Cyclones. So you're going to probably Cyclone most of the time because of your PvP talent, compared to the priest that is going to fear probably the off target or the kill target, depending on who you're going to go for. But you're not as efficient at CCing as, let's say, a survival hunter with a resto druid, or a survival hunter with a H priest, or a disc priest for that matter. So for me, it's going to be A tier because of that. I think if there was a world where Resto Shaman was like top tier, it would then be a lot easier for Feral Druids to be like very efficient with their CC. You would have a Cyclone and you would have a Polymorph with Hex, where you have like great CC rotations. But still, do you need to have like a very long CC rotation to end games? I feel like Feral Druid are one of the specs that can end game very soon because of Berserk and how it functions, but also can play dampening with a lot of dots and trying to run away whenever you have to. So there is that. Let's talk about... I want to talk about maybe the S tier that is the most obvious one, which is having Demon Hunter. It has been already a very, very annoying Season 3 with the Demon Hunters, but I think right now having Demon Hunter is also S tier in Season 4 because they lack changes, they lack balancing. I think right now it is obnoxious to play balance like a having Demon Hunter against a Demon Hunter, I would say, in 2s, in 3s, and also in Soul Shuffle, arguably also in RBGs, because again, I think melee wise they are like S tier. So I think in general, it needs a nerf. It is not only a 2's problem, it is not only a 3's problem, it's also not only a Soul Shuffle problem. I think it's a global problem with having Demon Hunter having a lot of defensives, a lot of utility, a lot of CC, and also a lot of damage that is really easy to pull off. It's not like you're having damage every X seconds. It's literally you're looking at someone, you're going to deal damage at all times to that someone. So for me, it's going to be S tier, and I think it's a very clear one. It is easily just a better warrior or a better windwalker for that matter. So I think I'm going to talk about windwalkers and monks in general. I think windwalker is also a very, very strong spec. Do I want to put them at S tier though? The representation is there. Whenever windwalker is higher than arms warrior, it just means that it is like high performing. It is a spec that is normally not as popular as I would say like warriors or other specs. But I think overall, windwalkers do fall flat the higher you go. So, do I want to put them at S tier because of the high population in 1800, or do I want to put them at A tier because of their fall off? If I trust my guts and the many times I had to play versus a windwalker, I feel like it depends on who you're facing. If you're facing, let's say, a spec that can maneuver behind or just in general around the windwalker and trying to win the games without getting cleaved by the windwalker and the healer besides him, I think you can still win those games fairly easily, I would say. But again, I think it's very class and spec dependent. I think in my mind I'm going to put them at A tier because I do feel like there is another S tier, at least two other S tiers that are like more deserving of that spot. I think they're really close to feral druids. Just in general, I think it's like a lot of rock paper scissors gameplay in twos, where your comp might win versus their comp, but their comp might lose versus a comp that would win automatically versus yours. So again, it's a bit like a triangle where every comp has a chance versus another comp. It's a bit annoying sometimes to have that kind of gameplay, but at least it is very logical. And also, I would say if there was a ban and pick system of your spec and your comp, then it would be very balanced. Unfortunately, it's not like League of Legends. You have your character and you're going to stick by it if you're queuing. So obviously, it can feel like you are helpless versus some like matchups. But for me, A tier, I think it's very deserved. Mistweaver, on the other hand, I'm actually not really that impressed. I think the representation is also not there I would say have a different opinion about that. Often or not, it falls flat and they get really, really fast. They are very good at kiting, that's a good thing, but they do die also very quickly once they have no CDs. They have to spend a lot of mana to heal throughout dampening. They're very good versus specific specs, but again, do you want to be very good at versus like specific specs, or do you want to be overall good with any spec versus any specs? I think just because of that, I'm going to put them at B tier. I don't think they're very high on the tier list. Obviously, you have a difference between fist weaving and mist weaving. For me, fist weaving just scores a bit higher than mist weaving because they don't get very quickly. They do add a bit of damage. They're a bit more flexible. But again, I think overall, if I have to put a tier for mistweavers, I do feel like they're B tier overall. So I think that's quite deserved. Um, let's talk about hunters right now. I think hunters are quite easy to rate. I do feel like survival hunter is S tier, and I do feel like BM hunter are also S tier together in the 2v2 bracket. Let's talk about Survival Hunter first. Survival Hunter is actually gaining a lot because of the tier set. I do feel like the tier set works way better in 2s than in 3s, while I think the previous tier set was quite good in 3s in Social because of the AoE splash damage and your bombs, just in general how the gameplay is working. But I do feel like in 2s you have way more chances to do Mongoose bites and do a lot of damage with that, and you can have very, very high hits and crits because of that. You also have like insane CC, you have insane kiting potential, you have good survivability. It's not the best, but it's still good. I think you're also very, very versatile. You have multiple comps at your disposal. I don't think you have like a straight counter to your spec, while other specs have that. You're also one of the specs that are very good versus Assassination Rogue because of your Mending Bandage, and also very good versus Feral Druids, because you can just pull out the bleeds, the poisons, whatever they are on the target, you can just like heal them up and also dispel all those bleeds and poisons, which is very, very interesting because again, if you have a death mark on you or your ally has a death mark, you can Mending Bandage and that's gone. So it's a straight counter to them, and I would rate Assassination Rogue very high too. So it's a S tier countering another S tier in my mind, kinda. Survival Hunter has also a lot of pacing that can be added by their presence, and you are really a pace setter. You are going to win games because of how you're going to have like a game plan made from the start of the game. It's also again a bit of bias for me, but I think it is one of the specs that I have also the most enjoyment in twos because of the freedom you have. You have so much CC at your disposal. Often you're going to be paired with a healer that is also very heavy at CC, and you can have straight up like 15 seconds, even more, straight CC onto the enemy. So if they're trinketing something wrong or you caught them without a trinket, they're going to often regret it, and a DPS cannot really survive for that long, except if it's a Havoc Demon Hunter. They can somehow survive through a lot of stuff because of Darkness, Blur, and Netherwalk, but still, you have a lot of tools at your disposal to win games. And I would say BM Hunter is quite the same, although they are not like straight counters towards Assassination Rogues and Feral Druid because they don't have Mending Bandage. But the good thing is about BM Hunter is their damage is constant and you cannot really run away from it. And the weaknesses that they have with their pets is also not as big in twos than in threes because, again, not all those specs are going to be able to root the pets off, while a mage, for example, in threes can easily do a root into a Ring of Frost and goodbye, your pet is going to be out of action for a few seconds. Or if you're lucky with your ment pet, you have a dispel. Again, you have to be lucky because of that, because it's not a straight 100%. So again, BM Hunter has the tools to be very strong in twos. Their damage is very constant. I think they are really annoying to deal with. They can kite very well, and they don't even need to kite very properly to also do a lot of damage. In contrary with Hunters, for example, where they need to kite like very efficiently, or else your damage is going to drop off. It's still like not as difficult as, let's say, playing a caster. But it's still difficult in if you compare it between the BM Hunters that are able to kite and do damage all the time, and it's like very minimal damage loss, while Hunters that are going to be having to kite, having to survive, having to create distance, often they do lose a lot of like damage just in general. So for now, I'm going to put them at S tier, and for that matter, I think Hunter is going to be very low A tier. I don't rate Hunter that high. You have some cheesy comps where you have double It can work at a low TR, like low CR, and I understand that it can work. It's very annoying to deal with. You don't have to panic first and foremost, and you also have to have a lot of communication with your healer, or else one of you two are going to die. So you have to play around your CDs very like I would say efficiently, and that is something that you have to learn. But I do feel like Hunters are not as good as, let's say, BM Hunters. I think the damage drop off whenever you're going to be like targeted, and often you're going to be the target, and also just in general the overall feel of Hunters and how they have difficulties with actually CCing. I do feel like Hunters cannot really climb as high as a BM Hunter, for example. Obviously, if you're a very good Hunter, you can still climb very high and you can still do very good. But I think if you play Hunter right now and you switch to BM Hunter, 100% you're going to feel the difference and you're going to feel like you're going to climb very easily. So that is a good comparison in my eyes to why something is A tier and why something is S tier. Now, let's talk about DKs. It's a very easy placement. I do feel like Frost DK is the worst melee in the game. In my opinion, for twos, I do feel like they miss a MS effect, they miss survivability, they are getting hard countered by multiple specs. that are straight up just better versus you because they have physical damage. BM Hunter eats Frost Decays alive. Survival Hunter eats Frost Decays alive. Havoc Demon Hunter eats Frost Decay alive. Just in general, every disarm spec eats Frost Decay alive. So Arms Warrior, Fury Warrior, Outlaw Rogues, Assassination Rogues, even Subtlety Rogues, um, mistweavers in general, windwalkers are like destroying Frost Decays. So overall, I am not really hopeful for Frost Decay in twos, but it's overall also just not a spec made for twos. So do you want to balance it around twos or not? I think overall the design has to change. Good thing is in War Within it does change a bit, and I am also very excited about War Within, but right now I cannot really rate them higher. And yes, you can climb if you're very good, but I think if you can climb as a Frost Decay, you can literally climb with any spec. So that's not a problem. I think it's more of a you thing that you are like very good at it and you're very good at the game, instead of like saying that spec is good, because it's literally not the case. So Unholy Decay, on the other hand, has some good matchups, can do some things that are good, but overall, even the representation is not really high for something that is actually okay popularity wise. I think they just get destroyed by physical damage most of the time. So Feral Druids, Windwalkers, PM Hunters, Survival Hunter, DH, to a certain extent because they have chaos damage, but still they have Fury Warriors, Arms. I think overall Unholy Decay is like middle of the road, and I think I am kind of right with that. You can comment below if you do think it's higher, but in my opinion, it cannot really get higher. They don't really have a real MS, moral strike effect, a mortal wound effect if you are not known because of the term. They have good damage, but it's not like extremely good damage. It is just good damage. They have great CC, probably one of the better CC game in the game, with Havoc Demons. I would say also the Hunter specs. They have crappy defensives towards physical damage, but they have good defensives towards magical damage. Unfortunately, magical damage is not really the most played thing currently in twos because it is just not really made for that. And overall, I do feel like Beater is not a bad spot for Unholy Decay. It means that you can climb with it. It's not going to be easy, but if you're competent with Unholy Decay, you're going to be able to climb, and that's something you might look forward to. So let's talk about mages really quickly. I think it's very hard to rate mages because they are either playing with a rogue, so it's rogue mage, and do we need to judge a spec based purely because of a comp, or do I judge like the intrinsic value of a mage towards a normal comp, which is often with a healer? I think Frost Mage, to be clear, is probably the better spec, but it's not by a long shot. I think it's like on the same level as Balance Druid, where it's very difficult to win games. I think you can win game reliably if you're playing with a good sub rogue, but I think the sub rogue and the Frost Mage needs to be like very high level. I think Frost Mage in general is very hard to pull off because with a healer it is very dampening, and you have to win in dampening, which is not really an easy feat to do as a Frost Mage. But also just in general, the tools that you have as a Frost Mage and the presence that you have as a Frost Mage in the arenas is not really a possibility for you to climb versus, let's say, a Feral Druid or a Survival Hunter or BM Hunter or a Windwalker. Just in general, you can like kite a lot, but you cannot kite indefinitely in twos. At some point, you're going to be caught, and at one point, you're going to have to ice block, and then the second ice block. So you can climb as a Frost Mage, but do feel like it is really dependent on your skill, and I think if you can climb as a Frost Mage, you're going to have an easier time if you're climbing Demonology Warlock, for example, or even a BM Hunter, for that fact. If we talk about mage specs, we're going to talk about probably one of the worst specs in twos, which is Fire Mage, I think. It could be D tier, but I'm going to rate them at C tier because I think it is deserving that spot. I don't think it's like as bad as a Frost Mage, Frost Decay, excuse me. but I do feel like Fire Mage has tools to finish up games, but they are very squishy. They don't have a lot of tools to survive. Um, so I rate them C tier because of the potential that you can have with a sub rogue, or you have the potential maybe with a holy priest with a good combust you can finish off like games really quickly, but it's not really the easiest thing to do, and overall it's also just not really a meta spec, and also just not a meta spec in twos. Arcane Mage, I think it's the same. I'm going to put them at C tier, although the participation is lower than, let's say, Fire Mage, but I do feel like they're very similar in how they do play, and very similar at how their win condition is. It's around the burst, it's around their CC, and the potential on the healer not to be able to recover. But overall, I still would recommend to play with a rogue, and rogue mage is a good comp. It just needs a lot of practice, a lot of communication, and you will fail most games. But once you have like the hang of it, and you're actually playing with someone that you trust, you might climb very high with like a mage spec. But then again, if you're playing rogue mage, would you prefer to play in frost mage, or do you prefer to play fire or arcane mage where you don't get a second reset? Because double ice block is something that you can play around. Well, Fire Mage doesn't have that. Let's talk about. I think I can talk about rogues really quickly. Well, I think Assassination Rogue is my S tier as well. No surprise, I think Assassination Rogue. I would say it's lowest because again you have like a other S tier, which is Survival Hunter, which is straight up a big counter to you, and you have to play like literally a god to win those games, or straight up just be better than the Survival Hunter. But on equal level, you will normally lose games. Assassination Rogue does a lot of damage, has a lot of burst, has a lot of constant damage. They have enough survivability to work. They have the CC to finish off like targets very quickly as well. I think having like again a kidney every 25 seconds, realistically 30 seconds, is something that you can play around very easily because of the DR trackers and how just arenas is played in twos. It's way more slow than in threes, where you don't really die in a instance. You're like very much in control if your healer is still alive, and or at least not CC'd. So you can last, you can make games last also. I do feel like Assassination Rogue is also one of the better specs to deal with classes like, for example, Affliction Warlock and Demonology Warlock. It's not really good at dealing versus specific other specs, like for example, a Survival Hunter, where I say it's a straight loss. I do feel like it. Let's talk about sub rogues though. I think sub rogues in twos is way hard to play right now because of how the HP pools are and how little it did scale for season 4. Sub rogue is surprisingly okay, but it will depend on the matchups, it will depend on the skill of the sub rogue, it will also depend on the comp and who you're facing. I think overall it will just depend on how it plays. So I do I do feel bad for rating them that low, but I think people might give me, or at least agree with me. If you do disagree with me, please talk with me because I wanna understand. But I do feel like for me it's B tier because of the same ish reasons as Frost Mages, Balance the Rate, and Holy Decays. You can have good games, but it will depend on who you're facing, depends on the brain of the guy that is facing you, because again, if they're not using CDs while you're using CDs, they're going to die. But anyone has played subs versus sub rogues. If you have played Dragonflight season 1, you know how it works, and you know how the bursts are working, you know how overall it is working for sub rogues. So I do feel like it, it cannot really deserve higher because of like, if you don't know how to play versus sub rogue, you're going to die, because I feel like a lot of specs have that win condition. But sub rogue kind of relies on that. You have good comps with rogue mage. You have good comps with a rogue or disc with a rogue disc priest, for example, like sub rogue disc priest. So you have ways to play around your weaknesses. But overall, you'll have to probably reset multiple times before you can land a kill to someone that is actually very aware of a sub rogue's doings, for example. I do rate Auto Rogue high. I want to put them at A tier. I do think they lack damage, and yes, representation doesn't really give me any foot to stand on, but I do feel like Auto Rogue is just not that great at finish up games. They will play in dampening for most of the games. They will suffer versus specs that can deal more damage or like quicker damage to you and your ally. Um, I think it's also very matchup dependent. It's also a lot less strong, I would say, than Assassination Rogue. If you play like Assassination and you play Outlaw Rogue, there's no real reason to play Outlaw Rogue. I might put them at S tier as well, to be honest, but I feel like you need some kind of separation, and I do feel like you have like not really the meta going on for you. So I'm going to put them at A tier. I might be wrong again, but I do feel like the rogue specs are very hard to judge because I do think there is a S tier with Assassination Rogue, and then you have those two other specs that are available that are also capable of finish off games, but they don't have the throughput of an Assassination Rogues in twos. And again, 2v2 is very much like a checkers where you want to have win conditions and you're creating win conditions, but you have to deal damage for that. You have to make them use CDs. If they don't use CDs, you're not going to win. And I feel like Outlaw Rogue can also just not make you use CDs. And yes, if you're like lucky with RNGs, you can make use of that. But yeah, I think Outlaw Rogue A tier is a good tier for them. Let's talk about Fury Warrior and Arms Warrior. So a popular, no, not really a popular, but my opinion is that Fury Warrior is very good at twos, and in threes it also kind of be good, but I think in social fight it's a bit less. And I think Arms in twos it has, I would say, Bladestorm, which is very strong, double Bladestorm, which is even more strong. Um, it's very tough to judge them. I'm going to judge them equally. I know that some people are going to call me mad, but I do feel like Fury is A tier with Arms. Why is Fury A tier? I do feel like their damage is quite hard and all the time since the changes towards their damage. So they got buffed on Rampage, they got buffed on their overall damage with Execute, and you have a specific build where you're playing with anger management where you do get recklessness like all the time. Um, but they lack Bladestorm. So on multiple occasions you're going to feel like you are not moving, and that's a true statement. Like you can have double charge, you can have leap, and still not move versus a lot of specs. I feel like most matches are won with a lot of like details, and it's not like straight up. You also like very much a lot of CC that other like specs have compared to you. Feral Druids have more CC, Windwalkers have more CC, Assassination Rogue has more CC, those two have more CC, and Having Demon Hunter has more CC. So if you compare Having Demon Hunter with a Fury Warrior, there is no match. Often, if you're equally as good and your healer is equally as good, normally you should lose. That is just a straight fact. The good thing is about Fury Warrior is you do have a 36% MS effect. So if you're able to stack it, normally you're going to be able to stack Slaughterhouse. You can win games because of dampening. But again, your survivability is very low. You have to probably rely on your healer most of the time. And I think overall the no Bladestorm is hurting a lot Fury Warrior. I think if you put Bladestorm into Fury right now, I think they would be a lot higher. But right now you don't have like Bladestorm, and you are very kiteable. That's the issue. And Arms Warrior, it's the opposite. I think you're a bit less kiteable because of double Bladestorm and the fact that you are like a Arms Warrior, which has more utility in general. You can go and PvP talents yourself with utility. But I do feel like you're missing the 36% mortal wounds from Slaughterhouse. You still have a 50% with Sharpened Blade. But I do feel like you're missing the constant damage that you could have a Fury Warrior. I think also Fury has more reliable damage constantly. since the changes towards the builds. Again, I made a Fury Warrior PvP guide. If you want to check that out, you can check that out. I do feel like also that Arms Warrior is not really scaling as well right now. And I think they're going to get a buff because of that for social fly in 3s, and in 2s they're going to get a buff automatically because of that. But I do feel like those two specs deserve like lowish A tier spots, and I think people might disagree with that because they're tired of facing warriors, and I understand it's very annoying, but I stress you that it is a popular spec and it is still not like top 3, top 4, and that's very important to know that it is a popular spec, but it doesn't have the representation that should have a popular spec if they were busted, and it is nowhere near busted. So let's talk about shamans. I think enhancement shaman, they do deserve D tier as well. But do I want to put them at the same tier as Frostdk? I'm going to put them at C tier because of that. Because I'm not going to make an extra tier between C and D. I do feel like enhancement shaman, they lack kill potential most of the time because they don't have MS effect, so it's easily healable. They have healing, which is good, but it is reduced by dampening. They are killed into stun locks, so if an assassination rogue is versus you, good luck with that. You are going to suffer. You have grounding totem, so you are able to work around survival hunter, but a good survival hunter might just like bait your grounding totem and that's it. You're going to get your healer CC'd, you will have to burrow or try to survive, and you might just not survive. You're very squishy, your damage is quite predictable. Flame shock, again, if you're playing elemental shaman, like an elemental build, is dispellable, and it's not going to be like dramatic to dispel as well, so your damage can be broken or just in general dampened. So for me, it's going to be C tier. I think they do deserve C tier. Elemental Shaman, I think it's going to be in the same row, and it's the same kind of representation. Although I'm going to say Enhancement Shaman is really the lowest of the C tiers. So again, mind also a bit like that problem. I think Enhancement Shaman, they do deserve a D tier, but I cannot put them at the same tier as Frostdk because I do feel like Enhancement Shaman has a bit more tools to win games because it's less predictable, while Frostdk is very predictable. So to keep that in mind. But I think Elemental Shaman, they do deserve C tier. It's very slow to play. It's very hard to win games. It's often very straining because the games are going to be very long. In general, you can get your Flame Shock reliably dispelled all the time. You cannot do anything towards that. It doesn't do enough damage to dispel it, so it's not going to deter anyone. They know if they're dispelling it, the lava bursts are going to be a lot less damaging, so it is going to be a straight benefit for them to do that. You can win games again, but it will highly depend on your healer, highly depend on the damage of your healer, and will probably highly depend on who you're facing. Again, I think good luck if you're playing versus an assassination rogue or even an outlaw rogue. It's going to be very difficult. I think in general, if you're facing a Havoc Demon Hunter, good luck to you. It's not going to be very fun. I think Feral Druids as well. You really have not that great, like, how can I say, matchups where you're going to have a lot of fun. I feel like they're very similar to Destruction Warlock, although Destruction Warlock, if you're letting him cast, is going to end games, while Elemental Shaman, games are going to be long regardless. So again, I do feel like they deserve C tier. Resto Shaman is going to be B tier to me. My partner in twos for my Fury Warrior, where we have like currently I think 14 wins, 2 losses or something like that. He's playing Restoration Shaman, and it is not that good because it is not great at playing defensively. I think in twos, you need to have a lot of defenses. You need to be able to stop offenses very quickly. You can do that as Resto Shaman, but I think if you compare 1-to-1 to a Holy Priest or even to a Resto Druid, it is way more active to play a Restoration Shaman, and you're again easily totem stomped as well, because again you need to be close to your melee or range spec, or else you're going to have a lot of difficulties because you cannot link if you're not close to them. So it's easily destroyed healing tide. It's really easy to destroy his totems. Again, if you see an earthen wall, you don't need to interact with them. You can just run away, and that's it. Earthen wall is gone, and then you can go back. I think overall you do pay the problem with Resto Shaman being like very heavily into totems, but also I think it's very easy to win as a Resto Shaman if they don't know your spec. So that there is like a double-edged sword to that. But right now I do feel like they're B tier, and if I compare to the healers that are A tier and also S tier, I do feel like they do deserve B tier, because I think other specs are like lower to Resto Shaman, for example. So let's talk about Holy Paladin. I think Holy Paladin is something I want to discuss because their representation is abysmal in US and in EU as well. They are bottom tier in healing, and they are quite popular in general. So what is the problem with a Holy Paladin? I do feel like Holy Paladin, they suffer from the fact that their healing throughput is not that good. Their mana is not that good. I think also, in general, your CDs are very good versus very specific specs. So you are very comp dependent. If you're facing warriors, Bob is going to be fantastic. If you're facing Survival Hunter, it's not that good. If you're facing a BM Hunter, it's alright. If you're facing an Assassination Rogue, it's good. If you're facing a Havoc Demon Hunter, bet it is not going to be very good because you're going to be the kill target. Good luck with that. Windwalker, I think it's an okay matchup. Feral Druid, it is also an okay matchup. But the rest, I don't really like Holy Paladin. I think Affliction Warlock, they just straight up suffer versus them. Demonology Warlock, very tough to face them. I think Hunter, often they can just switch up and like destroy you as well. I think all the other specs that are still not listed also still quite strong versus Holy Paladin. And you need to not forget, Holy Paladin, their dispel protection is gone because of the tier set. So that's very annoying. And it's easily dispellable as well. They can just mass dispel your bubble as well. Often you're going to be the kill target, and if you're not the kill target, then you're going to suffer as well because your mana is going to be very, very abysmal. I think the good thing about Holy Paladin is there is only one way for them, it's going to be up. So they're going to get buffs eventually. If it's not here, it's going to be in War Within. I do want to see Holy Paladin to be able to have a melee healing spec again, where they're like based on doing damage and healing. I don't know if they're going to ever make it come back in PvP. They did nerf it because of PvE, so it would be nice that they could get a buff for PvP as well, to compensate those nerfs. But yeah, I think it's if it's not D tier, it might be C tier. I think I want to put them at D tier, but it would be a bit too harsh for a healer. And if I compare to Frelsike, I do feel like Holy Paladin is a bit better, but really not by a lot. I think they deserve C tier, and there is that. Retribution Paladin is okay. I think they do lack MS effect. They have huge damage though, and they have the CC, but it's very predictable. Like, if you're playing as a Holy Priest, if you see him mounted and running towards you, you can either Shadow Melt if you're a priest, like the Night Elf, or you can Fade, or just straight up you can Angel as well. So if you're like very, very much in a sticky situation, you just go Angel and you're unCCable as well. But again, they can bait you as well with that. But still, I do feel like Retribution Paladin, they have the CC, they don't have MS effect, they have some kind of defensive purposes as well. But they will need to play with a very aggressive healer to compensate the MS effect. So if you play with a Disc Priest, it's alright. If you play with a Holy Priest, it's alright. I guess Restoration Shaman with a Retribution Paladin can be also alright, because of like Lava Bursts and Stormkeepers. But I think overall, you cannot really be paired with a Resto Druid, for example, and it's going to be very difficult with a Holy Paladin, so do not do that. So for me, it's going to be top of B tier, really close to A tier, but again, it's very hard to put a Retribution Paladin to A tier whenever you're comparing the A tiers with Retribution Paladin. And also, like representation wise, they're like very close to Unholy DK. And mind you that Retribution Paladin is one of the more popular specs in threes, for example. If I put 3v3, Retribution Paladin is up there, right? Top 2. 2v2, it is like 8th place. So yeah, I think it's not really meta at all. I think it is B tier. It's not bad, but I don't think it's like godlike as well. It might be a bit lower as well. It could be like here, but I'm going to put them at B tier for now. Let's talk about I think priest. I think it's a good one, and then we can end with drag tier. Let's talk about holy priest. I think it's the best healer right now. No contest, obviously. I think holy priest is a fantastic spec in 2s, in 3s, in soul shuffle. I don't know what happened for them to be like that good, but it's very annoying to deal with. Like, they do a lot of damage for free. They also manage to heal a lot of stuff. They can survive a lot of stuff as well. They can bait stuff. They have great CC. Again, chastise into fear is like a instant great fear, which you can then trap off, or you can do other CC shenanigans, for example, a kidney shot. So you have ways to extend CCs that are enough to win games, and sometimes CC is winning you games in 2s. It's not like a mythic plus like in 3s or in soul shuffle right now. I think 2s is still a CC land. If you like playing around CC, I do feel like 2s is more about CC than 3s right now, at least. Although it might be really weird as a statement, but it's true. I think in 3s you can be CC'd and not lose, but in 2s, if you're CC'd, you may lose because you only have one partner, and that partner needs to use a CD, and if he has no CDs, it is GG's. There is no other peeler in your team. So for me, it's going to be S tier because of the whole package that Holy Priest has. But I always felt Holy Priest being very good at 2s because of the CC that they have. Disc Priest, on the other hand, I kind of decided to have only one healer in S tier. It doesn't mean that it is not S tier, but I want to have some separation. I do feel like they are a bit worse, just a bit worse than Holy Priest, but I need to have some separation. I do feel like they're very close to Restoration Druid though. I think Disc Priest is just literally a second damage dealer, but with like healing capacities. You can really climb very well as a Disc Priest if you're able to play aggressive, and that sometimes is enough to win games, right? I do feel like Disc Priest is like a very entertaining healer to see, to watch, and to play in 2s. I personally don't like soul shuffling with the Disc Priest, but again, I think Disc Priest is also not really the greatest at the moment in soul shuffle. But I do feel like Disc Priest is doing well because of all the things that I said, but they like the CC. And the CC is... it's still okay if you're playing with a rogue, or you're playing with a survival hunter or a BM hunter, but then at the end, why not play Holy Priest if you like them both? Why play Disc Priest? Because Holy Priest has a stun with Chastise or a Disorient, and then you can fear it off. And that's a pretty easy setup that you can do it yourself, and you can win games because of that. While damage, you can also win because of damage, but it feels a lot more zug-zug, where if sometimes you need the CC and you don't have it, then it's too bad. It is GG's. You cannot really go back into respecing to Holy Priest. So for me, it's going to be A tier. Shadow Priest might be a sleeper caster spec, and it also shows in the whole popularity kind of representation. The higher you go, the more Shadow Priests you might have. For example, in 2400 you'll have 1. In 2100 you have 8, but mind you, it is not really the most popular spec in 2s. But I do feel like it's very comp dependent. It's also like very matchup dependent. Some matchups are going to win like automatically because of your CC and your damage. Especially if you're playing like double priest, for example, with double mind games, it's very hard to deal with. I'm going to put them at B tier. I want to put them higher. Well, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to put them at A tier. I don't feel like they're on the same level as the Frost Mage. It's very hard for me to put them at the same level as Frost Mage. but I think it is really the lowest of the lowest A tier though. If I have like the courage, not really the courage because I already did that multiple times, but if I have the energy to put a tier between A and B, and I had like the want for me to put some specs a bit lower because of the low tier A tiers, then I would do that. But I think right now I'm going to keep with just one tier, and you can then use your imagination to put the B plus if you want to. But for me, it's going to be low A tier, which is all right. I think they have the CC, they have the damage, they have survivability in twos, which is a bit less in social fall in threes, for example. But in twos, you have way more tools to deal with the problems that you have. But you have some counters that are still there, and it's also very annoying to deal with Havoc Demon Hunter, for example. Um, yeah, you are also just not the better Affliction Warlock, I think. Affliction Warlock is just better in doing damage. You have better CC, so there is that. But that's also the reason why you're A tier. I think the CC is enough to warrant a place into the A tiers. It might be a bit lower, like I said, but put that in your mind. It could be B plus or B minus even. Not B minus, but anyways, it could be A minus or B plus, depending on how you see it. Preservation Evoker is going to be also C tier. I don't like Preservation Evoker. I think Preservation Evoker is way too squishy in twos. It's easily a switch. If you see a Preservation Evoker next to the DPS, just go on the Preservation Evoker and he's going to use a CD. You go back to the DPS, then you switch back to the Preservation Evoker. He's going to use another CD, and then he's dead. So I think Preservation Evoker is not made for twos. It is truly made for threes or Soul Shuffle or even RPGs. The more targets you have, the better it is. I think in twos you have damage though, so you can climb because of how you can deal damage. You can play it like a semi-disc priest, but even more damage, even more burst damage at least. But I do feel like they don't have the throughput enough for twos, especially with dampening and how it plays. I do feel like Preservation Evoker is maybe closer to B tier than C tier, so I might go a bit higher. I'm going to put them top C tier, but they are not nowhere near as strong as, let's say, the other specs in the B tiers or the A tiers. Augmentation Evoker is going to be also joining the Frost Decays into the D tier for the same reasons. They are not as strong. They're not going to be capable to win games by themselves. You can win games again. You can be exceptional at Augmentation Evoker. But then again, why would you play Augmentation Evoker if you are also capable to play Devastation Evoker? Also, it is not an indication that you can climb as an Augmentation Evoker, that it is a good spec. It is just a statement that you are a good player and you can be able to climb with anyone else, right? So for me, it's going to be an easy D tier. Devastation Evoker is really interesting though. I have played with a Devastation Evoker whenever I was playing Disc Priest, and it did work out. They have incredible like one-shot potential. They can like solo games because of that. They can like solo win games because of that. But it's also very predictable. And the CC is alright, but it is with a CD, so it's not spammable like a Fear, for example. It's very tough. I'm going to put them. I'm going to put them at B tier, but it's a bit hypocritical, no? To put them at B tier and not Shadow Priest. Well, you know what? I'm going to put them at B tier, and there is that. Again, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to make another row. It is what it is. I didn't want to do that, but I'm going to do that regardless. I think it is needed because I do feel like those two are ideally in B plus. I do feel like. I do feel like those two are also B plus, and that's it. I think that is a good separation. I would also say maybe Restoration Shaman B plus as well. Then, and that's it. I think that's a good separation, so you understand that, look, they're lower to A tier, they're a bit better than the average B tier, but they are nowhere near like S tier. So I think that's a good separation between those specs. I think Devastation Reworker has great CC. They're okay CC. They have great damage though. They don't survive too much. They have good kiting potential. So versus some specs, they're going to feel a easier time than others. But it's not like incredible. So I'm going to put them at B plus. Although I think in threes and social flow it does very well. So that is the tier list. It has been 1 hour, so again, I continue with those long tier lists, but I do think people do like my long analysis. I do feel like twos is like so much untapped potential. I wish it had like glad mount. I wish it had a bit more potential, like in I would say showing off the bracket. Um, but yeah, for now, it is like this. Hopefully, more within we will get like a opportunity to make it. I would say a bit more popular, but we'll have to see. Again, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet, and we will catch you probably very soon in the next video. Have a great day.